He slammed her head into the fridge, and my mother just stood there, sipping tea like it was Tuesday. Hi, I'm Avon. I spent years convincing myself our silence was protection until I found the pictures, the bruises, and the will they tried to bury. Have you ever looked someone you love in the face and realized they were never on your side? Tell me, what would you do if the people who claimed to protect you were the ones who sold your pain for brunch? Let's go back to the night the fridge bled, to the moment I stopped being the daughter and became the storm. She said it was just a scratch, but the fridge was still bleeding. The phone buzzed violently against my nightstand, waking me from a sleep I didn't remember falling into. The screen glowed with one word that sent my entire body into instinct: Lyra. She never called this late, never called at all, unless something was very wrong. I swiped before it could buzz again. Lyra? Her voice was ragged, breathy. He smashed my face into the fridge. My heart stuttered. What? Who did? Wayne, she choked.
He snapped.
Said I was mouthing off. Then he used his elbow. I think my nose. I can't stop the bleeding. From the background came a shrill, familiar voice. Stop being dramatic. God, you always want attention.
Mom.
I bolted upright. My skin was electric with fury, panic, guilt. Are you safe? Where are you right now? On the floor. Kitchen. I crawled to the phone. Lyra whispered. Can't lock my door, it's busted. I'm coming, I said without hesitation. 5 hours. I'm driving through. As I yanked on sweatpants and grabbed my coat, a single text from her last month rang in my head. Don't come back. You just judge. That was the last thing Mom had said before I stopped answering. But now Lyra was bleeding, and my silence was no longer an option. The storm outside was vicious, like the sky itself was trying to shake me off the road. Wind slammed against the windshield. Rain came sideways, like knives. As I merged onto I-5 South, the wipers could barely keep up. My hands gripped the wheel tight, knuckles bone-white. A year ago, Randall had thrown a dinner plate that shattered at Lyra's feet. She flinched like it was normal. I had called Mom that night, voice trembling. She'd scoffed. Don't exaggerate. He's just under pressure. I should have called the police then. Now, I was speeding through a storm, trying to fix what I should have never left broken. By the time I turned onto the gravel road, the storm had started to break, but everything else in me had already cracked. The house stood like it always did, small, beige, forgettable. One porch light flickered in the fog. I could already smell bleach through the glass. I pounded the door. No answer. Again, harder. Then, the door creaked open, and Carleen Hallie Weston stood there, in a floral robe, arms folded like this, was some kind of inconvenience. You didn't need to come, she said, voice flat. I stared at her. Where is she? She's fine. It's just a scratch. But the fridge behind her still had streaks of dark red, barely wiped. The bleach reeked like panic. A thin mist still curled from the floor tiles. Mop water or tears, I couldn't tell. I brushed past her.
She didn't stop me.
The kitchen was fluorescent lit, buzzing overhead. The fridge, once plastered with Lyra's crayon drawings, was now bare except for paper-stained outlines and a long smear of blood. I froze. Then I saw her. Lyra, curled under the counter, clutching her nose, her cheek ballooned, one eye nearly purple. She looked up, and her entire body exhaled at the sight of me. I dropped to my knees beside her. Hey, I whispered. Her fingers shook as I brushed the hair from her forehead. I didn't know who else to call, she murmured. Her voice cracked like thin glass. You called the right person. From behind, footsteps padded across linoleum. Mom stood watching, arms crossed, no emotion. "It's not as bad as it looks," she said. "It looks like she got hit in the face with a goddamn cinder block. She bruises easily. You know that." I stood slowly, the fire inside me climbing my ribs. "No, what I know is she's been bruising. And you've been watching it happen." "She likes attention," Mom snapped. "She always did." I turned back to Lyra, helped her to the couch. Her limbs were fragile under the blanket I threw over her. I asked, "You want some tea?" She nodded. In the kitchen again, I opened drawers with shaking hands. When I yanked the one next to the fridge, it stuck halfway. I pulled harder. A manila folder slipped out and landed at my feet. No label, just worn edges. Inside, photos of bruises, dated in shaky handwriting. Notes like, April, left ribs. June, right eye. July, shoulder, 3-inch grip. My stomach turned. ER summaries, X-rays, reports all marked accidental. She'd been documenting it, quietly, for years. I turned slowly. Mom was back in the doorway, watching. I held the folder up. "She's been documenting everything. You knew, and you let it happen." Her face didn't change. Better than letting her blow up the family. Like my mother did. That word hit me harder than any storm outside. "Your mother?" I asked. "You mean Grandma?" Her voice was colder than the tile floor. "She kept records too. You see where that got her." I turned to Lyra. Her lip trembled, but she gave a tiny nod. That was the moment. The fracture. The shift. I wasn't just here to comfort anymore. I was here to rescue. I walked to the hallway, past the bedroom where Wayne's boots sat by the door. His presence loomed despite his absence. Back in the living room, I dropped beside Lyra. "We're not staying," I said. She whispered, "I have one more thing, but it's hidden." From the porch, wind rattled the chimes, faint and haunting. She closed her eyes, lips bloodied, but calm, and the storm inside me went deadly still. She bled in silence while they spent her checks. The morning after the storm was sickeningly quiet. Sunlight spilled weakly through the cracked blinds in the kitchen, landing on bleach-stained linoleum and dried flecks of blood near the fridge. I stood in that kitchen, breathing in the remnants of chaos, while the woman who gave birth to me calmly poured herself a cup of Earl Grey. No apology, no panic, just clinks of porcelain and the faint tick of the wall clock. The last time I spoke to her, almost a year ago, Lyra had messaged me asking for help to buy a new batch of nerve medication. The insurance wouldn't cover it. I offered to send the money. She thanked me, and 2 days later, Mom posted a photo of herself online, sitting under gold chandeliers at a steakhouse, glass of Malbec in one hand and the caption, "Deserved treat." Life's been hard lately. Back then, I just felt sick. Now I felt murderous. I made tea. Carlene said without looking at me, "You still like lemon?" I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app one hadn't checked in months. The one I helped Lyra set up last year when I convinced her to start receiving her disability payments into a private account. She'd said she wasn't ready. Said Mom handled the money. I told her to wait until she felt safe. She never did. Now, staring at the screen, I wished I'd insisted harder. The account balance flashed, $3.14. The transaction history? Nothing but teller withdrawal, cash every month, like clockwork. The deposits came in, and someone drained them within 24 hours. My hands curled into fists. Behind me, I heard the faint squeak of the laundry room door. The washing machine vibrated softly. Lyra had snuck into place a duffel bag inside. I saw it for a split second before she closed the lid. She wasn't waiting anymore. Not after last night.
Good.
I turned back to the kitchen, where Carlene was now cutting fruit. Like this was any other Thursday. So, I said, voice flat, that $240 steakhouse last weekend, that was part of the budget for caring for your disabled daughter? She didn't flinch. Do you think raising a crippled child is free? I took a deep breath. You didn't raise her. You drained her.
She scoffed.
I gave up my life for her. For both of you. She doesn't understand the cost of things. Neither do you, I snapped. Because you didn't pay. Lyra did. With her back, her legs, her silence. Something in her jaw ticked. Lyra stood quietly in the hallway, listening. She doesn't need money, Carlene muttered. She needs structure. She's not like other kids. She can't handle pressure. She handles being beaten, I said coldly, and being ignored, and crawling to the phone while you made tea. That's when Lyra finally stepped into the room, face pale but set. I never used that account, she said. Mom said money confuses me, that I might mess it up. I turned to her slowly. You're not the one who messed anything up. Carlene exhaled sharply and left the room without a word. I followed her. Along the hallway, I noticed a framed family portrait, us in front of the house one Christmas. I tilted it slightly. The back was uneven. I flipped it. A taped-over corner revealed the edge of another photo, partially hidden, a hospital intake form, folded and yellowing. I tucked that moment into my memory. There were more secrets here than what fit in any bank. In Lyra's room, tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of Little Women, I found a tiny digital recorder. I hit play. Mom's voice, low but clear. If she talks about Randall again, the will becomes worthless. You understand me? I won't lose this house. Then silence. Then, don't let her ruin it all again like my mother did. I stood there, the players shaking in my hand. Back in the kitchen, Carlene was wiping down the counter with a cloth that still smelled faintly of bleach. The tick of the wall clock pulsed like a metronome to my rage. I slammed the printed bank statement on the table, alongside a screenshot of her Instagram post from last week, steak, wine, and a smiling selfie captioned, "Deserved treat." She glanced at it, then at me. You let him hurt her, and you used her blood to pay for brunch. Carlene took a slow sip of tea. If this gets out, you'll lose everything. Both of you. You think a court will hand over a house to an unemployed woman with no legal guardianship. You think a court will ignore financial fraud, medical neglect, and child endangerment. I leaned in. Who paid for this house, Mom? Grandma's hospice fund? Or was it Randall's fake back injury claim? The teacup trembled in her hand. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. That stillness said more than words. At that moment, I caught sight of her walking past the hallway cabinet. She paused at a drawer and entered a code 4 digits. I watched, silent. The drawer clicked open, but she blocked my view. A locked drawer in a hallway no one used? That wasn't for cutlery. I would remember the digits. 1-9-7-4. Something about it felt rehearsed. I turned to Lyra, who was now clutching a drawer handle like it was keeping her upright. She opened it slowly and pulled out an envelope. Faded yellow, the edges worn thin. I didn't tell you before, she said. I was scared, but Gramps, he's still alive. And he sent this. I stared at the return address. A town 40 minutes away. The handwriting, don't let her take everything. I looked at Lyra. Why now? She glanced at the laundry room, where the duffel bag still hummed in the machine. Because I've already started packing. If she erased him, what else did she bury? The drive to Gramps' cabin took 41 minutes, but it felt like we crossed decades. The further we moved away from town, the more the road shrank. Cracked asphalt gave way to gravel, then to dirt veined with roots. Pines leaned close like sentinels guarding secrets. Lyra didn't speak the entire drive. She just held that yellowed envelope to her chest like it might vanish if she blinked. The cabin came into view just as the trees parted. Old but upright, it stood in a clearing of moss and fog, wrapped in silence except for the soft drip of rain from the eaves. A rusted wind chime hung crooked over the porch, clinking gently with each gust. I parked, opened my door. My boots sank into wet moss. The porch creaked under my weight. I knocked. The door opened partway, then all the way. He looked older than I remembered. Gray streaked through his beard, skin thinner, hands weathered, but his eyes were alive.
Bright.
Alert. And when they landed on me, they widened. "You've got her eyes," he said. "Your grandmother's." Lyra stepped forward behind me. Gramps froze for half a beat, then pulled the door wide open. "Come in." The warmth hit first. Real fire. No fake thermostat. The scent of cedar smoke, wool, and thyme wrapped around us. A soup pot simmered on the stove, and a battered kettle hissed gently on the back burner. We sat around a crooked table that still had pencil marks carved into it. My initials, maybe. Or my mom's. Gramps served bowls of soup. No words, just movement. Then finally he spoke. "After your grandma passed, Carlene emptied the hospice account. Every cent. It was meant for bills for burial. I called the bank. I filed a report. I threatened to take it to court." He paused, eyes on his spoon. "Next day, she vanished. Took both of you with her. Changed numbers. Moved states." "She told us you died in prison," I said. His lips twitched, but he didn't laugh. "She always was good at erasing things." Lyra dropped her spoon. It clattered loud on the wood. She reached down to grab it, then paused. "There's the gap," she whispered. I looked. One of the floorboards beneath the bench seat was slightly warped. Together, we pried it up. Dust flew, and under it, wrapped in a floral dish towel that had once been white, was a tin box. I opened it slowly. Inside, a folded legal document with an embossed seal, still crisp despite the years. Gramps inhaled sharply. I read aloud. "To my granddaughters, Avon and Lyra Halley, I leave all real estate and remaining accounts, including the cabin located in Lane County and the remaining joint savings under Thomas and Eliza Halley." A notarized signature. Date: 12 years ago. Below that, a handwritten note. Different ink. Looser strokes. "Thomas. Hide this until you see the fire in her eyes. She'll know when it's time. Love, Eliza." Lyra was crying softly now. She reached out, touching the paper like it might burn her. "She knew," she whispered. "Me knew about this. I'm sure of it." "I think so too," I said. I pulled out my phone and began snapping photos of every page. D. Chuck. Handwritten letter. Envelope markings. Then I backed them up to the cloud, then again to encrypted storage. Gramps didn't speak. He just sat, eyes closed for 3 long seconds. Then nodded once. Lyra picked up the tin box, hugged it tight to her chest like it was a piece of our grandmother herself. That's when it happened. Crash. The sound of glass exploding ripped through the cabin. I ducked, instinct snapping to life. The front window had shattered. Shards sparkled across the floor like deadly snow. A rock lay just inches from Lyra's foot. Taped to it, a scrap of paper. I unfolded it, hands shaking. "Stay quiet or next time IT won't miss." I ran to the porch. Nothing but fresh tire tracks carved into the mud, still wet, still steaming. She found us, I said as I stepped back inside, my voice flat. Gramps stood, walked to a drawer, pulled out a cloth-wrapped object, a revolver, old but well-maintained. He placed it on the table. I've had enough of watching this family rot. Then he slid over a paper bag with a disposable film camera inside. I started documenting everything 2 years ago. Don't trust digital. They wipe easy. That night, I didn't sleep. The fire snapped and cracked in the hearth, casting shadows that danced across the old wooden walls. While Lyra rested on the couch, I quietly searched her duffel for medication. I found something else. A laminated card tucked between bottles, her social security card. But the address? It still listed Carlene's house. I sat there, frozen. Every benefit, every application, every legal trail still led back to her. She still controlled the system. I looked over at Lyra, her chest rising slowly under a crocheted blanket. Then I whispered, more to myself than to her. Tomorrow, we reclaim everything. Justice wears a badge, but sometimes so does silence. The clinic smelled like bleach and old coffee. The lights buzzed overhead, humming with a tired kind of urgency. One of them flickered out, pulsing the whole hallway into a momentary breath of darkness. I held Lyra's hand as we waited, the vinyl seat beneath us creaking every time one of us shifted. She didn't speak, but I could feel the tremor in her fingers. The nurse finally called her in. Inside, fluorescent lights bathed the room in cold clarity. The nurse moved gently, her gloved hands tracing Lyra's cheek, her ribs, her wrist. Looks like soft tissue damage, possible cartilage deviation in the nose. Some swelling. And this, she pointed to Lyra's side, is a very distinct handprint. I inhaled sharply. Lyra didn't. The nurse paused, then asked, almost too casually, "Is this the first time something like this has happened?" Lyra looked at the ceiling. A long breath passed. Then she said quietly, "The first time anyone wrote it down." I felt something twist in my chest. "We'll document everything," the nurse promised. "Would you like a copy of the report?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Print and digital." As we stepped back into the waiting room, I saw the light from the front door shift. A silhouette entered, broad shoulders, worn leather jacket, slow, deliberate steps. Sheriff Wallace. He looked exactly the same as I remembered. And like that, I was back at the supermarket, 11 years old, watching him laugh with my mom after Randall slapped Lyra for knocking over a can of peaches. "Kids today are too soft," he'd said. And Mom had smiled. "You know how to deal with the weak ones, don't you, Sheriff?" Now he greeted me with a fatherly smile. "Ms. Hallie, you got a minute?" I followed him into the hallway. The overhead light here flickered gold, casting long shadows down the walls. I noticed he chose the spot deliberately between exits. "We got a call this morning," he said. "Concerned citizen. Claimed your sister might have been taken without consent." I folded my arms. "She's 17. She came willingly. She's still a minor. She's also got a broken nose. Want to see the x-rays?" He chuckled, but his eyes stayed cold. "No need to get emotional. I'm here to help. But stirring up trouble like this, things could escalate. Child Protective Services might step in. And if it comes down to custody, well, blood ties don't always win. I've seen kids land in group homes for less." I stared at him. "She has evidence. And you're threatening her?" "Just offering perspective. You're protecting a man who beats her. Again." He leaned close. "I'm protecting peace. You think dragging this through court's going to end clean?" I didn't answer. He gave a short nod and turned, boots thudding away down the waxed linoleum. As I walked back toward the lobby, something scratched against my jacket pocket. I reached in and found a folded scrap of paper. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but I read the words carefully. Meet me. 7 p.m. Old boat ramp. Come alone. The sun was setting behind the lake when I parked, headlights off. The boat ramp looked abandoned, warped wood and rusted cleats swallowed by shadows. I stepped out. Cold air skimmed the surface of the water, and mist curled at the edge of the dock. A man stood waiting, quiet, still. Deputy Elias Ruiz. He nodded once and pulled out a weathered cell phone. I pulled dispatch files. From 3 years back. Take a listen. He handed me earbuds. The audio crackled. Then a woman screamed. Just hold her still. A deep male voice barked, indistinct. Then a loud crash. And a child's cry. I knew that voice. So did Lyra. She'd followed me, quietly stepping out of the car just in time to hear it. Her hand gripped my wrist. That was me. Ruiz didn't blink.
There's more, he said.
He pulled a USB from his coat and tapped his phone again. A new clip played. A calm, measured voice. My mother. Just say she fell. I don't want another scandal. A second voice, a nurse. But there are finger marks on her throat. If you document it differently, I'll sue this hospital to the ground. The file ended. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. She didn't just protect him, I muttered. She blackmailed everyone who didn't. Ruiz handed me the USB. I can't move on this.
But you can.
You're outside the system. I took it from him. Our fingers brushed. You've seen this before, I said. He hesitated. My sister. She died at 16.
Same story.
Records vanished. Warnings ignored. I won't let it happen again. I nodded. This goes to court. Back at the cabin, the wind had picked up. Gramps was sitting at the kitchen table, running a cloth along the barrel of his rifle. She's not done, he said, eyes still on the metal. The only question is, are we ready? I didn't answer. Later that night, I watched Lyra sleep on the couch. The fire cast soft shadows across her face. Her chest rose and fell gently, like for the first time in weeks. She wasn't afraid. I checked the porch camera.
Paused. Rewound. There.
3:07 a.m. Randall. Standing just outside the tree line. Still. Watching. Not moving. He stayed for 47 seconds. Then melted back into the dark. I stared at the footage and whispered into the room. He's not done. But neither are we. She said I was lying, until the courtroom watched her stand and do nothing. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold coffee. It was the kind of place where people whisper even when they're allowed to speak. The sky outside hung heavy with gray clouds, the kind that threatened rain but hadn't quite committed. Inside, every breath felt like it echoed. Lyra sat beside me in her wheelchair, her hands clenched on her lap. She hadn't said a word since we got out of the car. She didn't need to. I could feel the fire in her, and I wouldn't let her face them alone. Across the aisle sat Carlene, my mother, dressed in her finest cream blouse, lips painted, hair pinned tight like always. Beside her, Randall Weston looked like a man rehearsing an alibi. Their lawyer, some smug man with a slick tie and too much cologne, adjusted his papers and smirked at us once. I leaned over to Lyra. This is our story now, I whispered. The judge entered, stern-faced, silver hair, and a voice that carried weight. Court is now in session. Their lawyers started first. Your Honor, he began smoothly, Ms. Weston has always acted with the utmost concern for her daughter's well-being. This is a case of emotional overreaction. Ms. Halley, the older daughter, left home years ago and returned only recently, disrupting a fragile but functioning family unit. There is no legal guardianship. No consent. Simply chaos. Carlene nodded solemnly, like it physically pained her to be so misunderstood. I wanted to leap across the bench and shake her. The judge looked unimpressed. Let's see the evidence before we dramatize, counselor. He gestured to Carlene. She stood and began her testimony. Your Honor, she said, voice low and practiced. I have tried to give my daughter everything. Lyra has always struggled, emotionally, physically, and I have done my best to manage a household that includes financial strain, a disabled child, and an unpredictable stepfather. My nails dug into my thigh. Sometimes, when children lash out, she continued, it gets complicated. When she returned to her seat, Randall's lawyer rose. We move that the court recognize this case as a custody overreach. Ms. Hallie Avon removed Lyra without permission. The judge turned to our side. Marissa Duval, our lawyer, stood up calmly. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit a piece of video evidence before I respond. The judge nodded. The lights dimmed slightly. A screen flickered to life. It was grainy, time-stamped from 5 years ago. Lyra sat at the kitchen table, maybe 11 years old, eating cereal. Her legs didn't even touch the floor. Randall stormed in, screaming something about spilled milk. Then it happened. He yanked her from the chair and slammed her into the refrigerator. And Carlene, she was there. She stood with her arms crossed against the wall, unmoving. No gasp. No protest. No reaching for her child. The courtroom was silent. The air dead still. Someone in the jury box wiped a tear. Even the opposing attorney sat frozen. Marissa's voice cut the silence. Can anyone here still claim this was an accident? The judge turned to Carlene. Is that you in the corner of the frame? Carlene didn't answer. Then Lyra was called to the stand. I helped her wheel forward. Her breath was shaky, but her voice, when it came, was steel. He did that 7 times. I counted, she said. Did your mother witness these events? Yes, Lyra said. She always told me not to tell. She said I'd ruin the family. That people like me don't survive in foster care. The judge leaned back in her chair, then leaned forward again. Ms. Hallie, thank you. The next words shook the room. Based on the evidence presented, the judge announced, this court is elevating the case to the grand jury. However, I will issue an immediate ruling on obstruction and conspiracy. She turned to Carlene. Angela Weston, you are hereby taken into custody on charges of obstruction of justice, aiding and abetting child abuse, and insurance fraud. 2 deputies moved forward. What? Carlene hissed. Randall tried to stand. Your Honor, this is a... Sit down, Mr. Weston, the judge snapped. The cuffs clicked onto Carlene's wrists. She stood face-turning red. Mai tuong jakan kiet tatlada a, tauda hai sin ca doi. You are out of order, the judge snapped again. And you will not speak to this court like that. Carlene was dragged from the room. She twisted back to glare at me. Lyra stared ahead, her mouth set, eyes calm. The judge turned to Randall. Mr. Weston, pending further hearing, you are restricted from leaving the state. Any contact with the victim will result in immediate arrest. Randall nodded once, jaw tight. The courtroom emptied slowly. I felt Lyra lean against me slightly. Is it over? She asked. I looked at her, still so young, still healing, but no longer voiceless. No, I said. But they finally heard you. We stepped out into the gray morning. The air smelled like rain. One reporter called out to me. Ms. Hallie, any comments? I kept walking, holding Lyra close. At the car, she asked again, softer this time. What if they come back? I unlocked my phone. I sent 3 emails, one to the state attorney, one to a federal hotline, and one to a reporter who had reached out last month. Each email included the video, the court transcript, the notarized will, and every picture Ruiz gave us. If they come back, I said, the whole country will know their names. I could feel Lyra exhale beside me. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to strength. I could feel it in me, too. I could feel the fire. The wind that morning didn't howl. It breathed, soft, steady, alive. For the first time in what felt like years, the trees outside the cabin didn't look like shadows waiting to lunge. They looked like trees. Just trees. Inside, everything was half unpacked. Boxes still cluttered corners, and the couch had a patch of duct tape where Lyra spilled juice yesterday. But there was laughter now. The kind that started small, like a spark, then caught gently in the room's wooden ribs and glowed. Lyra was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. They were terrible, misshapen, one side slightly burnt. She grinned when I peeked over her shoulder. They look like Randall's face after court, I said. She snorted, and for a second, she laughed. Fully. No flinch. No weight behind her eyes. I watched her hands, no tremble this time. Just syrup and confidence. While she cooked, I checked the new security system. Front door sensor, green. Rear camera, streaming live to my phone. The bank notification chimed. A deposit from the state welfare account, redirected to Lyra's name. Her name. Not Carlene's. Not Randall's. That mattered more than most would ever know. A knock at the door startled us both, but it was just Gramps. He held a small box. These were tucked away in the attic. Thought you should have them. Inside were photos. Me and Lyra on a swing. Lyra asleep on Nana's chest. Nana, smiling like she knew something we didn't. She left these for you, he said. Your grandma wanted you to remember who you were before they tried to rewrite it. I blinked fast. Thanks, Gramps. Later, an envelope slid under the front door. I picked it up, fingers tensing, but it wasn't a threat. It was from Marissa. Official court notice. Temporary guardianship granted to Avon Halley. Attached was a protective order. Randall was forbidden from approaching us. Sheriff Wallace had been suspended pending federal investigation. A side note in Marissa's handwriting said, "This case is now on the federal docket." I looked at Lyra. We're not ghosts anymore. She smiled, small but real. Out on the porch, the sky dimmed toward dusk. I stepped up on the stool and reached toward the old beam above the cabin entrance. The wind chimes clinked softly in my hand, repaired, polished, threaded with copper wire. When I hung them, they swayed gently. A sound rang out, a tone not of warning, but of memory. A healing sound. Lyra stepped onto the porch behind me, barefoot. She closed her eyes and whispered, "That's the one. I used to count the chimes during storms. 1, 2, 3, safe." We stood there a while. That night, she fell asleep holding the pillow she'd embroidered herself, the word safe stitched in uneven blue thread. I walked into her room once, just to check. Her shoulders didn't twitch. Her breathing was deep. She was sleeping through the night. I turned to leave, but paused. "We burn their lies, Lyra," I whispered. "Now we build with truth." Outside, the wind rustled again. The chimes answered, light, soft, resolute. And somewhere out there I knew Randall still watched. Maybe from shadows. Maybe waiting. But we weren't afraid. Because this time, we weren't alone. And we weren't silent. Tomorrow, the newspaper headline would read, "Local Dynasty of Silence Exposed. Years of Abuse Protected by Powerful Names." I'd already sent it to every inbox that mattered. And when the wind blew again, It wasn't to warn. It was to remind us we'd survived it. And now we speak. After dinner, Lyra curled up on the couch with a book, an actual novel, not one of the school handouts she used to pretend to read. She didn't just turn the pages. She sank into them. Her foot tapped lightly to the rhythm of the wind chimes outside. I sat beside her and opened my notebook. The cover was leather, worn, creased. On the first page, I wrote, "Case log for Lyra. For Nana. For the ones they tried to silence." Each entry would document everything: the hidden files, the stolen money, the nurse's statement, Wallace's threat, the courtroom transcripts. Not just for court,
For history.
because truth, when told in full, stops being a weapon. It becomes armor. Lyra leaned over my shoulder. "Is that your book?" "It's going to be," I said. "I want the world to know exactly what they did. And how we ended it." She nodded, then held up her arm. A faint scar curved near her elbow. "They don't go away," she said softly, "but they stop hurting when I know I lived past them." I didn't answer. I just took her hand and squeezed. Later that evening, Gramps brought out a small wooden plaque and nailed it next to the cabin door. It read, "If no one else will stand, I will." He didn't explain. He didn't have to. Before we all went to bed, I stood one more time by the window. The moonlight spilled over the field, soft and silver. No movement, no watchers, just wind. Ruiz had texted earlier. "Weston still in the state. Off radar. Be alert. But for now, you're clear." It wasn't a victory text. It was a warning.
But it didn't rattle me.
Because the system that once ignored us was now under fire. Because now, when we spoke, people listened. And because Lyra's last words before drifting off were, "Do you think Nana would be proud?" I touched the pendant around my neck, hers. She already was. Then the wind chimes sang again. Not for fear, not for hiding, but for healing. I no longer live in fear. The silence that once haunted us has been replaced by the soft echo of wind chimes and the steady rhythm of peace. Lyra sleeps through the night now, and I wake up knowing we reclaimed what they tried to steal: our voices, our safety, our dignity. What I've learned is simple. Pain doesn't disappear, but justice gives it a name, and truth gives it weight. No one gets to build a life on the suffering of others without facing the storm they created. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or forced to stay silent, this is your space. Share your story, or speak for someone who can't. The world is finally listening. And if you want to hear more stories where silence ends and truth begins, make sure to follow. We're just getting started.